My name is Ava Carter. I'm 23 years old, and I just graduated with a degree in psychology from Oregon State. But this isn't a story about academic success or some hallmark coming-of-age moment. This is the story of how my own sister tried to destroy my life, and how I stood there, on stage, while she screamed for the world to hear. She cheated her way through college. I was 3 steps from the podium, 1 breath from finally holding the diploma I had sacrificed 4 brutal years for, and then her voice sliced through the air like a switchblade. Everything stopped. The clapping, the smiles, the music. Phones whipped up, hands froze mid-applause, and every face turned toward her, and then to me. I heard nothing but the dull thud of my own heart and the swish of my graduation robe. I felt my palms tremble as I stepped forward. My vision tunneled, but my body kept moving, locked into autopilot. I took the diploma. I leaned toward Dean Whitaker, the man whose signature stamped the bottom of that certificate. I whispered, "I need to speak with you privately." He nodded without flinching, calm, steady, just like we planned. Because what my sister didn't know was that she had just detonated her own trap. And this time, I wasn't the girl who shrinks. This time, I had receipts. 2 days earlier, I had sat alone on the porch of my tiny studio apartment in Corvallis, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the soft golden light touching the edge of the treetops. My cat, Piper, purred gently on my lap. I was calm, mostly, but under the stillness, a current of something deeper, restraint, the kind you learn when you've been underestimated long enough to master the long game. I wasn't always like this. I used to want her approval more than anything. I used to brag about her to my friends. Natalie's going to be a lawyer and an actress. Probably both. Because she was that kind of person, the kind people lit up around. My sister could walk into a room and make strangers feel like old friends. Teachers adored her. Our aunt used to say, "You girls are both lovely, but Natalie, oh, she's going places." Back then, I didn't mind. I liked being the quiet one, the satellite. I stayed out of trouble. I got good grades. I didn't need attention. Until, somehow, I started catching up. Freshman year of high school, I beat her in math. Sophomore year, I got into a mentorship program she'd been rejected from. By senior year, my GPA overtook hers. I won a full scholarship. And suddenly, the light she used to shine felt like it had turned inward, burning, resentful. I remember the first time her compliments came wrapped in barbed wire. "Wow, Ava, I didn't know psych majors even had to study that hard. Guess it's easier when you don't have a social life." I laughed it off. I always did. I chalked it up to sibling teasing. But over time, the teasing twisted into delays, disruptions, doubt. It started sophomore year of college. My scholarship check was late. Like, rent is due and I'm eating ramen, again late. The financial aid office blamed incomplete documentation. I'd sent everything. Twice. A few months later, my academic advisor pulled me aside. "Hey, Ava, we received an anonymous complaint accusing you of plagiarism." My heart dropped. That paper, I'd obsessed over it. Triple-checked citations. Grammarlied it into oblivion. It passed. But it shook me. Then came the weird emails I never sent. Appointments I never canceled. Evaluations in my name that I'd never written. And one day, a stranger approached me in the campus library and asked, "Are you the tutor who charged me $200 and ghosted me?" My stomach sank. I'd never seen him in my life. Each incident was spaced just far enough apart to seem like coincidence, but they left this buzzing unease under my skin, like walking through fog you can't explain. Still, I didn't think it was Natalie. Not yet. Until the money disappeared. It was right after winter break junior year. I'd planned everything to the dollar books. Rent, groceries. But the refund I expected wasn't there.
Instead of $2 to $800, it showed $397.
I called. They said the records showed the funds were already dispersed. Then came the email. Due to recent adjustments and prior disbursement activities, your refund has been reduced. Oh, I hadn't made any. And when I pulled my bank history, I saw it. Small, frequent Venmo transfers, $25, $45, $6, labeled things like club dues, textbooks, lab fee, altogether nearly $900. But I hadn't joined any new clubs. And then a $2,500 charge, laptop upgrade, AVAC. Except I hadn't bought a new laptop, and AVAC wasn't even my initials. The shipping address and apartment one town over. I knew who lived there. Her ex, the same one she claimed to have blocked months ago. That's when I stopped blaming chance. This wasn't bad luck. This was intimate, calculated, personal. She had access to my old Google autofill, my student portal, even my middle school password recovery answers first pet, favorite flavor. Natalie didn't need to hack me. She had been me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, freezing in my hoodie because I couldn't afford to run the heat. I stared at the screen. Then I opened a private browser and searched Cybersecurity Investigator Oregon Student Fraud. I clicked on a quiet-looking site, a recommendation from a forum. That's how I found him. Brandon Ng? He didn't look like someone who could take down your whole life with a keyboard. Clean-shaven, mid-30s, wore flannel and a watch with a cracked face. But 3 weeks later, he walked into our second meeting holding a thick folder. His voice was calm, but his words were like gunshots. I can link over 24 fraudulent activities back to Natalie Carter. That includes 7 unauthorized student portal logins, 4 purchases delivered to her ex-boyfriend, and a mirrored email account she used to impersonate you with your professor. I felt the floor tilt, and then he said the one thing that stuck. She's not just trying to sabotage your grades, Ava. She's sabotaging your name, your credibility. So when she accuses you later, people will believe her. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled out a yellow notepad and started writing. Not a letter to her. A letter to myself. 1 sentence at the top. This time, you won't stay small. I slid the letter into my graduation gown, right next to a silver USB, the one that held every truth she thought she had buried. And as I stood there, 3 steps from the podium, her voice echoing in the room, I realized something. She thought she'd won. She had no idea she had just walked straight into the fire she lit. Growing up, Natalie was everything I wasn't. Loud, magnetic, unforgettable. She could walk into a room, and without saying a word, everyone would stop and take notice. Teachers remembered her. Neighbors adored her. Strangers leaned in when she talked. Me, I was the quiet one, the good kid, the one who followed rules, colored inside the lines, and never gave anyone a reason to complain. I used to be proud of that. But in my family, being quiet didn't get you much. Being impressive did. And Natalie had been impressive for so long, it was like our family forgot anyone else existed. At birthdays, my mom would lean over with her wine glass and whisper, "You two are both so smart, but Natalie's got that extra spark, don't you think?" I'd smile, pretend it didn't sting, and I told myself it didn't matter, because I didn't need spark. I had substance. But the truth was, I wanted to be seen too. It wasn't until high school that things really shifted. Freshman year, I beat Natalie's old math score by 3 points. I didn't even realize it until the teacher mentioned it casually. Natalie overheard. She didn't say anything right away, but 2 days later, when I got home, my biology notes were shredded, literally torn and tossed in the bathroom trash like a mangled journal. When I asked, she said, "Must have been Piper. Maybe keep your stuff out of reach next time." Piper was a guinea pig. I wanted to believe her, but the look in her eyes, cold, flat, like I had chipped away at something sacred, stuck with me. Then came junior year. I was accepted into a statewide mentorship program for students interested in neuroscience. It was incredibly selective, only 12 students per year. Natalie had applied before me. She didn't get in. The night I got my acceptance letter, she hugged me, tight. But as she pulled away, she whispered, "Wow, I guess they must have liked your sob story." And I laughed, because what else could I do? Because if I let myself absorb it, it would have broken something I couldn't fix. By senior year, the divide between us was a canyon. I graduated valedictorian. Natalie barely made top 10. She didn't come to my speech, said she had a thing. The next day, she posted an old photo of herself holding a debate trophy with the caption "Class of 2016, when being brilliant actually meant something." Subtle, right? But I kept quiet. I always did. Because deep down, I still believed that if I didn't fight back, she'd stop. That if I stayed small, I could keep the peace. I left for Oregon State that fall with one suitcase, one scholarship, and zero illusions about what my college experience would be like. I knew it would be hard. What I didn't expect was how far Natalie was willing to go to make sure I failed. It started with the email. Sophomore year, I had scheduled a tutoring session with Professor Langley, one of the hardest to reach faculty in the psych department. I showed up at his office right on time, nervous and overprepared. He never came? When I emailed to follow up, he said, "Sorry you canceled last minute. Hope all's okay." I hadn't canceled anything. Then came the flagged plagiarism report. It was an anonymous tip submitted the day after I'd uploaded my capstone draft to the campus server. The same draft I'd been working on for weeks. Cited, reviewed, checked, flawless. I defended it successfully, but the doubt didn't go away. And one night, while checking my student account, I noticed something strange. A second email was listed under my recovery options, just one letter off from mine, a single added vowel. I clicked through the logs. That account had emailed Langley. "Hi, Professor. Swamped today. Can't make our session. Hope you understand." It was signed Ava. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't just sabotaging me. She was building a record, a story, a case, so that when she finally accused me publicly, it wouldn't sound crazy. It would sound believable. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, every muscle stiff, staring at the cracked ceiling like it might offer answers. Piper, my cat, curled against my feet like a soft, living weight, reminding me I was still here, still fighting. And for the first time, I thought maybe this isn't just sibling rivalry. Maybe this is war. The next morning, I changed every password, locked every backup, removed every recovery option, deleted every shared drive, revoked access from old devices. Then I printed every questionable email, every weird transaction, every text message that suddenly made more sense in hindsight. I opened an Excel file and titled it Pattern Netter Natalie. And I called home. Dad picked up. He was in the garden, watering his tomatoes. I could hear the hose in the background, the lazy splatter of water on concrete. "Hey, kiddo," he said. "You all set for graduation?" I hesitated. "Dad, has Natalie ever said anything weird about me about school?" He paused. "What kind of weird? I mean, has she ever said I didn't earn my scholarship? Or that I was cheating?" Long silence. "Then she's made some comments," he admitted. "Said you had it easier. That you were the favorite. That Mom gave you more." I exhaled. Slowly, he added. I didn't take it seriously. Thought she was just venting. "Yeah," I said, barely a whisper. "I know." But in my chest, a crack formed. Because even though I had spent years pretending I didn't need their belief, a part of me had hoped someone had noticed, had seen through her. They hadn't. That week, I made the call that would change everything. A friend had once mentioned a guy, a cybersecurity investigator, who helped her recover money after an online scam. I never thought I'd need him, but his name echoed in my mind like a lifeline. Brandon Ng. He didn't ask questions, just listened, took notes. When I finished explaining everything, he simply said, "This feels personal, and personal makes people sloppy." I sent him the spreadsheet, the logins, the screenshots. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, he sent me a file, encrypted, password protected. Inside were dozens of documents, meticulous, undeniable, IP addresses matching Natalie's home network, timestamps aligned with her known location, chat logs from burner accounts linked to her phone number, even delivery records of textbooks sent to her ex's apartment. She had spent 2 years pretending to be me. 2 years siphoning off money, trust, credibility, inch by inch, all so that one day she could stand in a room full of witnesses and point her finger at me, and people would already believe her. And I realized she hadn't made a mistake. She'd laid a trap. So I built a counter trap, silently, carefully. And when Dean Whitaker saw the folder, his expression didn't shift. He just said, "Let her speak. I'll know exactly what I'm seeing." What Natalie didn't know was that by screaming cheater during my graduation, she wasn't tearing down my moment. She was handing me the match. And I had gasoline soaked through the whole story. By the time graduation week arrived, everything was in place. My cap and gown hung neatly behind the door. I had ironed every crease until it looked untouched by stress, unlike me. The speech I'd been asked to write as an honors graduate sat in a folder, printed twice, once with the safe version the committee had approved, and once with a version I kept for myself, one with a truth no one had heard, yet. Beneath the seat where I'd be sitting on stage, I taped a black envelope, inside screenshots, transaction logs, metadata reports from Brandon, email headers, all of it. The silver USB I'd been carrying everywhere, I'd cloned it. 2 copies, one for Dean Whitaker, one for me. The original stayed close, tucked deep into the inner pocket of my gown like a quiet weapon. Brandon had also done one last thing. He prepped a local press contact, just in case. He said it like it was casual, like ordering an extra umbrella in case of rain. But I knew better. This wasn't rain. This was a storm. Natalie had no idea I was ready for her. But I had learned by now she couldn't help herself. She needed to be seen. She needed the moment. And if I let her believe it was hers, she'd take the bait. 15 minutes before the ceremony, I spotted her. She stood just inside the guest entrance, dressed like she was attending a press conference instead of a graduation white blazer, tight curls pinned like she was preparing for battle. Her lipstick was too red, her laugh too loud. She wasn't alone. 2 girls flanked her, former classmates of mine she'd barely spoken to in years. Now they were all nodding as Natalie performed, hands gesturing, voice rising above the hum of the room. She was warming up her audience, and I gave her none of my attention. I took my seat among the other honors graduates. The hall smelled like fresh programs, new perfume, and nerves. I exhaled slowly and found Dean Whitaker's eyes near the podium. He didn't nod. He didn't smile. He just looked at me, grounded, present, ready. This was no longer about revenge. It was about reclaiming the one thing Natalie had tried so hard to take. My credibility? The ceremony began like every other national anthem. A welcome speech, generic quotes from dead philosophers. Parents fanned themselves with brochures. Cameras flashed every few seconds. When the names started rolling, the air shifted. They were going alphabetically. And my last name, Carter, meant I'd be one of the final ones called. Perfect. My breath slowed. I let the rhythm of the names anchor me. Let each clap become white noise. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Then, just as I rose from my seat, just as the announcer began to speak. It happened. Natalie's voice pierced the auditorium like a dagger laced in venom. She cheated her way through college. Gasps. Rustling. A camera shutter snapped loud enough to make someone flinch. Another voice. She stole from the scholarship fund. She used fake grades and burner emails. Every head turned toward the guest section. Natalie was standing now, arm raised, face contorted, not with rage, but with certainty. She believed every eye in that room would turn against me. But no one moved. Not yet. I walked. Each step was deliberate. The kind you take when you're not sure if your legs are shaking or if the earth is. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The sound of her voice was unraveling, from triumphant to shrill, from accusatory to panicked. Because no one was joining in. She had shouted into a storm and realized she was alone. I reached the podium. Dean Whitaker met me, still expressionless, but his eyes were locked onto mine. I accepted the diploma, my fingers curled around the edge, not with fear, but with finality. Then I leaned toward him and said, calmly, the envelope under my chair. It's labeled A13. He gave the faintest nod. It will be handled. Behind me, Natalie's voice cracked. You can't let her walk. This is fraud. I have emails, look. But security had started moving. One usher approached from the left aisle, another from the right. She saw them. She tried to backpedal. I'm not done. She doesn't deserve that degree. I have proof. But she didn't. I did. And what Natalie never understood, what people like her always miss, is that true sabotage doesn't come from screaming in a crowded room. It comes from silence. It comes from letting someone unravel their own lies, while you stand steady, calm, unshaken. As I crossed the stage, people didn't clap immediately. They watched. They watched me walk tall, while the woman who tried to destroy me flailed in the background, her carefully rehearsed meltdown disintegrating under the weight of truth. Phones were up. Not for her. For me? That's when it hit me. For years, I had shrunk to make her feel big, dimmed so she could shine. But in that moment, I realized I never had to steal the spotlight. I just had to stop stepping out of it. Dean Whitaker met me backstage. In his hands was the black envelope I'd left under my seat. She handed you the stage, he said softly. I nodded. She always does. She just doesn't know it. But what he said next changed everything. She handed you the stage, Dean Whitaker said, holding the black envelope like it weighed more than a few ounces. And then he added something I hadn't expected, Ava. This goes far beyond school policy. I remember blinking at him. The lights backstage were dimmer, but my skin still felt hot from the attention, from the humiliation, from the way Natalie's voice still echoed in my bones. I know, I said. That's why I hired someone outside the system. Dean nodded once. Then he slipped the envelope inside a locked file box and turned to his assistant. Alert the university legal team and schedule a meeting with the ethics committee. He looked back at me. Tomorrow morning, 10 sharp, bring your investigator and your attorney. That night, the video went viral. Apparently, one of the parents in the front row had been live streaming the entire ceremony on Facebook. The clip had everything. Natalie's voice clear, furious, accusing me of cheating, stealing, lying. Then me walking silently, shoulders squared, eyes steady, accepting my diploma as security closed in around her. The contrast was brutal. The comments were even more savage. This Ava girl didn't even flinch. Queen behavior. When your hater ruins their own life in 4K, she thought she was exposing someone. Turns out it was herself. By midnight, people were tagging me. My inbox exploded. Classmates, old friends, even distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. But there was one message that stood out. It came in at 3:10 a.m. from an unknown number. "You humiliated me. I'm your sister. You owe me an explanation." I didn't respond. Because after years of silence, years of pretending not to notice the cuts disguised as compliments, I didn't owe her anything. That morning, I met Brandon and my new attorney, Chloe Ramirez, in Dean Whitaker's office. Chloe was the kind of woman you didn't interrupt. She wore navy blue-like armor and walked like she was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Her voice was fast but precise, and she carried a legal pad that already had my case number on the corner. She reviewed the report Brandon had compiled, page after page of fraud, impersonation, financial theft, and deliberate academic sabotage. Then she looked up at me and said, "This is airtight." She left a digital footprint the size of a marching band. "You want to press forward?" I swallowed hard. My palms were sweating again, just like the day I stood on stage. But this time, I didn't feel frozen. I felt aligned. "Yes," I said, "but not just for me." Chloe tilted her head. "She's done this before," I said. "To other people. I just never put it together until now. Old friends, exes, our cousin. She told him I had medical bills and borrowed thousands. I never saw a dime." Brandon nodded. "We've already started documenting that thread." Chloe smiled. "Then let's make sure she doesn't get to rewrite anyone else's story ever again." We filed the civil suit that Thursday. Fraud, identity theft, academic sabotage, 4 counts, backed by a stack of digital receipts and 1 silver USB drive. I didn't tell my parents. Not directly, but I knew the news would spread. Fast. Sure enough, by that evening, our family group chat, which had been quiet for weeks, started buzzing. Aunt Carla called me, voice low, wary. "Ava, I'm sorry we didn't see it. We just thought Natalie was struggling, that she needed support." I paused, letting her words hang. "She did," I said finally, "but not the kind that requires tearing someone else down." The following week, the university launched a formal investigation. Security footage showed Natalie entering a restricted faculty area 2 days before graduation. She'd used an old student ID card, one she'd never returned. And in a move that almost made me laugh from the sheer desperation, she had tried to plant physical copies of the forged emails into my student file. It was sloppy, embarrassing, and obvious. She was banned from campus. Her alumni privileges were revoked. And still, I felt no satisfaction, because none of this gave me back the 4 years of stolen peace, the months of questioning myself, the late nights wondering if I was losing my mind. What I wanted was clarity. And that came in mediation. It wasn't my choice to see her again. It was a legal requirement before going to trial. She walked into the room wearing sunglasses indoors. Her lawyer trailed behind like a handler with a fragile celebrity. Natalie didn't look at me. Not once. The mediation itself was cold. Numbers, damages, restitution. Brandon's data and Chloe's precision made it simple. Natalie owed me $75,000. It didn't bring me joy. It brought closure. Almost. The session ended. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard hurried steps behind me. "You think you won," she hissed. I turned. She'd taken the sunglasses off. Her eyes were wild angry. Yes, but underneath, something else. Fear. "No, Natalie," I said quietly. "I didn't win. I healed. There's a difference." Her jaw clenched. "You always thought you were better than me." I shook my head. "No, I wanted you to be proud of me, but all you ever wanted was for me to stay small." For a moment she froze, like she hadn't expected honesty to sting worse than any insult. "You took everything from me," she whispered. "No," I said. "You gave it away, for spite, for ego. I'm just taking it back." I walked away, not angry, not vindicated. Just free. And as I stepped out of that building, into the sunlight that hit different when you weren't carrying someone else's shadow, I knew it wasn't over. Because Natalie wasn't just a sister. She was a storm. And storms don't fade quietly. The court's ruling came on a Thursday morning in late June. $75,000 in damages. Restitution for the stolen scholarship funds. Reimbursement for legal costs. And punitive damages related to identity fraud. I sat there, still in disbelief, not because I doubted we'd win, but because for so long, I'd lived in a world where Natalie always walked away untouched. And now, for the first time, there was a record, a real legal record that said, "You were right, she lied, and you didn't imagine it." I didn't cry, I didn't smile. I just took a deep breath that reached parts of me I hadn't touched in years. Freedom doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes, it feels like stillness. But I didn't keep the full payout. Because this was never just about the money. It was about what the money could mean. So I donated half of it to a new initiative the university had launched after reviewing my case, something called the Student Integrity Defense Fund, meant to help students facing false academic accusations or reputational attacks. Dean Whitaker invited me to speak at its launch ceremony. I was nervous at first. Public speaking had never been my thing. But when I stepped up to that podium, looking out at the rows of students, professors, alumni, and parents, I didn't talk about Natalie. I talked about silence. About how telling the truth isn't always about being believed. Sometimes, it's about freeing yourself from the need to be. 6 months passed. My life got quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from emptiness, but the kind that grows after a long storm. No more late-night email alerts from strange devices. No more texts from unknown numbers. No more pretending that I was fine when I wasn't. I had moved into a small apartment on the edge of Corvallis. It wasn't fancy, but it had sunlight in the morning, a kitchen I painted yellow, and a shelf filled with mugs Piper kept knocking over. And for the first time, it felt like mine. Not borrowed, not shared, not shadowed. Mine. But one feeling wouldn't go away. A nagging itch in the back of my mind that said, this can't be where it ends. Everything Natalie had tried to destroy couldn't just become a personal lesson or a closed case file. It needed to become something useful, something generous. So I emailed Dean Whitaker. Subject line: proposal for scholarship fund. I told him I wanted to start small, 1 student per year, someone who had been gaslit, sabotaged, silenced, in ways no handbook or policy was ever prepared to catch. He replied in 1 sentence. Name it and it's yours. I called it the Carter Second Start Fund. Yes, I kept our last name on it. Because sometimes the best revenge is not erasing where you came from, but reclaiming it and making it mean something better. The first recipient was a transfer student named Ela. She'd dropped out the year before after discovering her aunt had used her FAFSA login to apply for loans under her name. Ela had spent almost a year working at a diner, sleeping in her car, trying to clean up a mess someone else made in her name. Now she was back, studying sociology. And when I met her in person for the first time, she hugged me like she already knew me. I thought I was the only one, she whispered. You never were, I told her. As for Natalie, she disappeared, deleted her socials, moved out of state Idaho. According to distant family chatter, there were rumors she was applying to nursing school. Another rumor said she was writing a memoir. But nothing stuck. And, for once, I let her fade. Because she'd stolen enough oxygen already. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries. Thick ones, firm ones the past can't claw through. One Sunday morning, I sat on my porch, coffee in hand, Piper curled on my lap, twitching in her sleep. And I thought about everything it took to get here. Every fake email, every sleepless night, every time I'd questioned my sanity or shrunk myself to stay out of the way. And I smiled. Because I didn't just survive her sabotage. I turned it into soil. And from that soil, I grew a life. One rooted in strength, one watered with peace, one filled with a light she could never dim again. But then something arrived in the mail. A single envelope, no return address. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. No greeting, no signature. Just 10 words, typed. You may have won the court, but not the truth. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter like a piece of undetonated truth. I stared at the plain white paper. The sentence printed in typewriter font, no punctuation, no name. You may have won the court, but not the truth. My first instinct was denial. Maybe it wasn't from her. Maybe it was some internet troll, someone fishing for attention after the video went viral. But I knew better. The spacing, the ellipsis, the deliberate lack of a signature. It was her. Natalie was always theatrical, but never sloppy. Even now, she was crafting a narrative, one where she wasn't the villain, just misunderstood. A victim of her golden child sister and a rigged system. She was trying to reframe the story. Again. I tossed the letter in a drawer, next to the old yellow notepad I'd written my pre-graduation letter on. The one I kept. Not because I needed it anymore, but because it reminded me who I had become. But all that night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with Piper curled against my shoulder, her tail flicking gently with every anxious breath I took. What if she wasn't done? What if she was planning something worse? I knew how this worked when people like Natalie lose control. They don't stop. They escalate. And the letter wasn't a goodbye. It was a promise. The next morning, I emailed Brandon. He didn't hesitate. Come in, today. His office looked the same, modest, messy in the way only a genius's space can be. Empty coffee cups, screens stacked too deep, a whiteboard covered in red marker notes I couldn't begin to decode. I scanned the letter, I said, handing him a photo. Printer origins masked, no watermark, but the wording. It's her. Brandon narrowed his eyes. It's not just the wording. It's the fingerprint pattern in the paper fold. She holds her thumb sideways, presses hard. I saw the same pressure on the burner email archives. I blinked. You're kidding. He shook his head. I don't guess. I verify. Then he leaned back, thinking, this isn't just resentment anymore. This is legacy management. She lost the trial, but she's trying to win the story. So what do we do? Brandon's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. We finish it. Properly. Chloe was on speaker within 10 minutes. This changes nothing legally, she said, but we can pursue a cease and desist, or, if she keeps poking the bear, I'm happy to file harassment. I hesitated. No, I said. Let's not tip her off. Not yet. I had learned something important through all of this. The most powerful weapon isn't a loud accusation. It's letting someone expose themselves, fully, publicly, irreversibly. So instead of reacting, I started collecting. Natalie hadn't gone completely underground like she wanted people to believe. Brandon found out she was living with a friend in Boise. No job listed, but she'd started writing under a pseudonym on a storytelling blog, a place where anonymous contributors shared true personal essays and memoir chapters in progress. She'd been posting weekly, and one of the entries was titled, "The Sister Who Stole My Life." It was full of half-truths, convenient edits, and complete fabrications. In her version, she was the gifted older sibling who had to watch in silence while her insecure little sister manipulated her way into becoming the family favorite. She didn't name me directly, but she didn't have to. Every detail made it obvious. She's laying groundwork for a redemption arc, Chloe said after reading it, probably aiming for a podcast, a book deal, maybe even a TEDx talk. Brandon added, and once that narrative gains traction, if you push back too late, it looks like retaliation, not truth. So I made a decision. If she wanted to use her voice to rewrite the past, then I'd use mine to amplify the actual truth. And this time, I wasn't waiting for a stage. I pitched an op-ed, a long-form article, personal, raw, factual. Title: The Cost of Being the Quiet One. I didn't mention Natalie by name. I didn't accuse her of anything new. I just told my story, start to finish, with receipts. The cyber sabotage, the emails, the stolen money, the trial, the quiet rebuild. And I included one quote that struck a chord across every platform it was shared on. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't surviving the lie. It's surviving how long it took people to believe the truth. The article exploded, shared by professors, therapists, advocacy groups. People started tagging me in their own stories. Stories of family betrayal, gaslighting, academic misconduct, sibling sabotage. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. 3 days after the article went live, I received another envelope. But this time, it wasn't typed. It was handwritten. Still no name, but the handwriting flawless cursive, overly looped YS was unmistakable. Inside was a single sentence. You don't get to control everything. But here's the thing. I didn't need to, because now I didn't need anyone to believe me in private. The public already had. And then another twist. Brandon called. His voice was tight, focused. I need you to come in, he said. Now. I drove to his office with my stomach in knots. He didn't greet me with small talk, just motioned toward his screen. She slipped, he said, big time. On the monitor was a screenshot from a deleted comment she'd accidentally posted under her real name on her fake blog account. It wasn't just a rant. It was a confession. A sentence that said, I made one mistake. I let her walk across that stage. The IP matched her address in Boise. The timestamp matched the same hour she posted her latest anonymous essay. And just like that, the final thread unraveled. I stared at the screen, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, I let myself smile, not with cruelty, not with pride, but with peace. Because she had tried to rewrite my life with lies, and had accidentally carved her name into the margin. But there was one more move to make. And this time, it wasn't about her. It was about the next girl like me. The one who didn't have a Brandon, or a Chloe, or even the words to explain what was happening to her. And I knew exactly what I had to do. Isla's eyes filled with tears the day I handed her the scholarship check. She gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. I thought I was the only one, she whispered. I placed my hand over hers and said, You never were. In that moment, under the bright fluorescent lights of the Student Integrity Defense Fund launch, I felt everything click into place. The twists, the betrayals, the courtroom drama, every dark midnight of doubt, it had all led here. When I first started planning this fund, I was scared. What if it backfired? What if I became the next target? Another story manipulated by Natalie's camp. But as Isla hugged me, gratitude shining in her smile, I realized something. Justice isn't a destination, it's a responsibility. And now, it belonged to all of us. A few weeks later, I sat with Ela at the campus coffee shop. She sipped her latte steamed milk art, swirling like a tiny galaxy on top. Tell me your story, I said gently. She took a deep breath. She told me about the aunt who'd used her FAFSA login, the surprise bill notices, the eviction notices, the sinking feeling that no one would believe a young woman without connections. Her hands shook as she spoke, but her voice grew stronger with each sentence. When she finished, I asked, how does it feel to tell it? She paused, Then she nodded slowly, like I'm finally breathing. Watching her, I understood that the scholarship wasn't just money. It was a symbol, a second start, a chance for someone's silence to reclaim their own voice. And the silver USB. That little drive I carried through every twist in courtroom drama became its own talisman for the fund. Every year, we give recipients a small token, a USB engraved with their name, empty inside, for them to fill with their own stories, evidence of their own truths. It's a promise your story matters. We'll help you protect it. As for me, life settled into a new rhythm. No more looking over my shoulder for anonymous emails. No more panicked password resets at 2 a.m. No more shrinking myself into the background. I've accepted speaking engagements. I mentor students in the Honors College. I even guest lecture for Professor Langley, who's now a close ally, often introducing me with a wink. Let me present the fiercest advocate I know. And most nights, I sit on my porch as Piper prowls the yard, watching the sunset paint the treetops red and gold. I breathe, I smile, I let myself believe I built this life. But every now and then, I think about Natalie. I wonder if she's okay, if she's found her own version of peace, or if she's still crafting narratives under pseudonyms, trying to make herself the victim. I don't know, and I probably never will, because part of moving forward is letting some questions remain unanswered. When I look back, I see a trail of Cliff's moments where I teetered at the edge of giving up. The biography accusations, the stolen scholarship, the fake emails, all of it threatened to send me over. But each time, I discovered one truth: silence protects the saboteur, while speaking truth frees the survivor. The Carter Second Start Fund has awarded 3 more scholarships since Isla, a first-generation student whose roommate anonymously spread rumors of academic dishonesty, a veteran returning to school, sabotaged by a jealous peer in the ROTC program, and most recently, a refugee scholar whose identity was stolen to open lines of credit in her name. Their stories echo mine, but each one is unique. Each one is a new bloom from the soil I grew. And the USBs we give them sleep in their pockets, ready to hold whatever they need: evidence, photos, letters, data files, so no one can ever doubt them again. A few nights ago, I received another letter. Not an accusation, not a threat, just a thank you note from a student in Oregon who read my op-ed and contacted the fund anonymously. Your words saved me. I was about to quit. I thought I was the problem. Thank you for giving me back my future. I read it on the porch under the twinkling stars. Piper stretched, yawned, nudged the paper with her nose like she approved. In that quiet moment, I realized something profound. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was ours. Every woman who's ever been silenced, every student who's ever been gaslit, every person who's ever doubted their worth because someone else wanted them small. Our stories intertwine, and by telling mine, I unlocked doors for hundreds more. I tucked the letter into an envelope, addressed it to Carter Second Start Fund, and mailed it. Somewhere out there, someone read it and felt hope. The next morning, I walked into Whitaker Hall for a panel discussion. The room was packed. Cameras, reporters, student newspapers. I stepped to the microphone, heart pounding, not with fear, but with purpose. I looked at the faces before me, young, old, every shade in between, and thought of every step that brought me here. Every tear, every moment of doubt, every you can't. And I smiled. Thank you, I said softly, but so everyone could hear. Thank you for believing the truth is worth fighting for. As I began my talk, I felt Piper's collar jingle in my pocket, the tiny USB I still carry, engraved not with my name, but with a single word: believe. And in that moment, I knew. This was only the beginning.